Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how's it going today?
Oh, it's going fantastic today, Tim. I cannot wait to have this conversation. Every once in a while, we like to bring these weird stories to the table, discuss what we're calling these things that happen in the weird space. So a little bit of a take on Crawlspace. This is Weirdspace. We haven't done it in a while, and it's always nice to just bring it back. You know, every once in a while, we're like, hey, what do you got? What do you got for links? What do you got for stories out there? So super excited to have this fun conversation. I think the listeners will love it. But Tim, the listeners will also love knowing how you are today.
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. Yeah, I'm excited. I love these Weirdspace episodes. I follow weird news regularly in my life anyway. And oftentimes when I see a weird story, I will click on it and I will have some thoughts about it. And so that's pretty much what we're doing here today. We've got 7 stories that we're going to go through pretty quick. They all fit a weird variety of spaces for this show. So we're going to talk about those in just a moment, but before we do, we got to let you know about our subscription service. We're now on Apple Podcasts, so you can subscribe to Crawlspace Premium on Apple Podcasts, but if you're not on Apple, don't worry about it. You can go to crawlspace.supportingcast.fm and sign up for the same product there. It's $4.99 a month. You get early releases, ad-free episodes, and our bonus show that everybody loves. And also follow us on social media at Crawlspace Podcast or Crawlspace Pod.
And Tim, before we break for commercials and come back with our Weirdspace episode, we did promise our good friend Susan, shout out Susan, that we would give a little bit of a PSA here. The weather all over the country is unpredictable, especially in the South and the Southwest. They're having record cold temperatures, so we just want to remind people, if you're animal lovers, if you're pet lovers, make sure to keep your pets safe inside, and when you do take them out, make sure that you just ensure that they're properly covered and they don't freeze. So there you go. We just wanted to make sure that people knew that. It's on our minds as well, and we will be right back after these commercials with our episode of Weirdspace.
So our first story, Lance, is about the actor formerly known as James Bond, one of the actors formerly known as James Bond.
Roger Moore.
No, it's Pierce Brosnan. He's 70 years old now. He's got a court date on January 23rd, 2024, where he faces possible jail time. Can you believe this? Can James Bond possibly be sent to jail?
I thought you were going to say, can you believe that he's 70? First of all, this is one of the handful of individuals on my man crush list. I don't know if you're aware of this. I'm sure you are. I think I fell in love with him when I saw that picture of him at the airport, just carrying a basic bag and just looking very cool with his outfit on. And I was just like, damn, that is a good looking dude. And this is probably like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So he was in his probably mid 60s at the time. But Tim, I can't fathom what on earth Pierce Brosnan would have done to have set himself up for possible jail time.
Well, we'll tell you here. He actually went traipsing around Yellowstone National Park, and specifically in thermal areas that he doesn't belong in. And so he's actually facing citations of, quote, foot travel in all thermal areas and within Yellowstone Canyon confined to trails, and violating closures and use limits. That's what the court records show. And these files were filed in Wyoming, and they are criminal charges. Federal law states foot travel in all thermal areas and within the Yellowstone Canyon between the Upper Falls and Inspiration Point must be confined to boardwalks or trails that are maintained for such travel and are marked by official signs.
So the concern here is that they don't want people entering into these dangerous areas for their own safety for the most part. So this isn't like he physically harmed somebody. This wasn't like he defaced property or did anything of that criminal nature. This is essentially trespassing.
Yeah, pretty much. And so he went too close to hot springs, I guess. And the park says that hot springs have injured or killed more people in Yellowstone than any other natural feature. And more than 20 people have died after entering or accidentally falling into Yellowstone's hot springs, according to the park, because certain thermal pools can reach deadly temperatures of over 150 degrees Fahrenheit.
I see. So Pierce Brosnan knew that these things existed. Apparently there are multiple signs and warnings online and in the print versions of their maps and trails, but he probably wanted to go in there to sit in some of these hot springs.
I don't know. That's a little unclear whether or not he was trying to hang out there, but this sort of comes on the heels of a guy named Jason D. Wicks, who's 49 from Michigan, and he was arraigned in federal court on August 23rd, 2023, and he faced criminal charges in the same way because he was actually drunk, and he went into the hot springs and apparently burnt himself. And the incident remains under investigation. Trial date has not been set yet, but he is banned from Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks until these charges will be resolved. So, yeah, there's definitely some precedent about this. Maybe Pierce Brosnan didn't know how serious these charges would have been, but not wise.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think if he had known, or if anybody who violates these laws, probably they're not expecting jail time. They're probably expecting, what am I going to get, a fine, a warning or something? Maybe they'll say I'm not allowed back on the property. But I don't think any of them are really expecting jail time. And it does seem like this is something where people maybe go to and they can use it as sort of a bragging point. Like I was in the hot springs in Yellowstone. Yeah, people know like, oh, you're not supposed to do that. But I don't know if I would ever do that. I mean, maybe in my, I'm not smart now, but maybe when I was even less smart in my early 20s or something, I would do it. But while they do seem beautiful, it's just not my thing to like sit in a bunch of warm water. Have you ever done hot springs?
I don't think I've actually done hot springs, but they're produced by the emergence of geothermally heated groundwater onto the surface of the earth. Well, I'm just quick at the Google, but basically what I'm saying is it's dangerous. There's supposedly a supervolcano under Yellowstone anyway, and you're just playing with fire if you're messing around, especially in an area you're not supposed to be in Yellowstone, and you're like, oh, that's a hot spring. Let me try that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you're playing with magma to be relevant. But I have actually been in hot springs in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. My friends and I went there when we were in our early 20s, and we went to multiple hot springs that were within this one public park, and it was at the base of a volcano, and we actually saw the volcano erupt, which was crazy.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge eruption.
Did you run out of the hot springs?
We did run out of the hot springs to see the volcano because people were saying the volcano's erupting, but we didn't run out because it was dangerous at all. You could see it was it was very far away, and it was all set up in a way where this was like a tourist attraction. It was like I don't want to say resort, but it was like a theme park almost.
I see.
With hot springs, but I didn't enjoy it. Like, I don't enjoy sitting in like warm water.
Well, it's more natural and healing, supposedly, than like a hot tub or something. So I think I'd like it more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like it more than a hot tub.
But my question is, what is Pierce Brosnan doing here? Is this some kind of audition for the hit show Yellowstone? Like, is he trying to make headlines along with the word Yellowstone so that people either think he's on that show or maybe, hey, that's an in to get on the show? Because that show is apparently taking over the world.
Well, yeah, maybe he wants to replace Kevin Costner.
Do you think Kevin Costner's upset about this? Do you think he senses this?
No. I think Kevin Costner is done with Yellowstone.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. He's pretty much done with Yellowstone. He's got that 2-part Western movie that he has been working on for a few years now.
Is that not a Yellowstone movie?
It's not a Yellowstone movie, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So actually, when I first saw this headline about Pierce Brosnan, I thought it was like I did make that association. It was Pierce Brosnan, Yellowstone. Those are the key words that stood out. So I did think that this was a connection to the series, and he was going to enter in as like the character, not replacing Kevin Costner, but the star power character.
He should do that. They should recreate what he really did on the show Yellowstone. He should stumble in and be like, "Oh, that's a good looking hot spring. I'm gonna jump right," and then he gets arrested.
Big time drama.
That might be a good storyline. Yeah.
Yeah, big time drama, and everybody's telling him. I'm gonna say his name is Billy. Everyone's telling him, "Billy, you can't. There's signs everywhere. There's regulation. You can get arrested." And he goes, "Arrested?
They can't arrest James Bond.
They can't arrest Billy Bond."
All right, Lance. And so that brings us to our second story, where we're going to stay out west.
Yeah.
And this story is about a giant Volkswagen Beetle-sized tumbleweed that was spotted hurtling its way down a 4-lane road in California recently. I guess this is in November, and the video was posted to Twitter, and it just says "the mother of all tumbleweeds" in Spanish, and it is an enormous tumbleweed, and it got me doing some Googling and some thinking. At first, it was funny, but I didn't realize how much of a danger these tumbleweeds could be.
I didn't realize what a tumbleweed was until we saw this story. And same, I Googled it, I was looking into it, and I learned a lot about tumbleweeds in a very short period of time and how, yes, you're right, they're dangerous. Like, you could get trapped inside your home. There have been stories of people who have had a tumbleweed outside of their door or outside of their car door, and they're not able to open the door fully and to, like, work your way through this, like, thorny thistle is dangerous.
Yeah, and not just one. Sometimes it's like an attack of them.
Yeah.
So a tumbleweed is a diaspore, this is from Wikipedia, that once it's mature and dry, detaches from its root or stem and rolls due to the force of the wind. And then it disperses its seed.
Yes. That's actually part of its life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially like seeding the soil as it's rolling, which I thought was really fascinating because it's actually serving a purpose as it's doing this, I guess, tropey thing that you see in movies, and people will say, like, it's a ghost town and there's a tumbleweed going through it, like tumbleweeds in here, but you don't realize, hey, this thing's actually serving a purpose here.
Right. Well, yeah, it's serving its own purpose, but it's kind of like an invasive
it's exactly
thing. It's not really great for humans. And in fact, have you heard of Tumblegeddon, Lance?
Oh, please.
In 2020, a swarm of tumbleweeds took over a stretch of Washington State Highway, and these tumbleweeds piled up to 30 feet high in some places. Cars and trucks were trapped for hours, and authorities dubbed it Tumblegeddon. Yeah, it's pretty wild. There's some more stories of this, too. Happened on New Year's Eve at one point where people actually rang in the new year being trapped inside their cars, and they were later rescued. Also, I watched a video of houses disappearing, basically with dozens of tumbleweeds all over the lawn and the house, and they need legit construction crews almost to get rid of them.
This was really reminiscent of the molasses flood in Boston that we covered a while ago, where you hear about it the first time and it's kind of funny, and when you start reading the details, you realize that this isn't funny at all. This is terrifying and tragic. This felt like along the same lines, where a tumbleweed just felt like this goofy thing, like it's just bouncing along, and then you hear these stories about these like tumblegeddons and how people are trapped, and it's a life-threatening situation. But, Tim, not all tumbleweeds are bad. I didn't realize until looking into this that tumbleweeds are actually edible. Did you know this?
I did not know this.
They're edible. It can be cooked in the same way when the plant is young. It can be cooked in the same way that you'd cook collard greens. So I'm guessing, sort of sautéing this tumbleweed.
All right.
And during the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, America's cattle were actually saved from starvation because they were able to eat this tumbleweed that was everywhere. So,
wow.
I mean, they saved America's cattle. So, I'm just saying, you got the good and the bad here.
True. That's interesting. I can't see myself trying one necessarily, but hey, I don't know. I haven't been in that kind of climate in a while. Maybe it's a delicacy in some restaurants.
And my last fact that I found out about these tumbleweeds is you're familiar, Tim, at ground zero of Southern Nevada's nuclear test sites, right?
Sure.
Well, tumbleweeds are always the first plants to grow back after they test a nuclear explosion.
I can't say that surprises me because it just looks like, like scraggly, dead grass anyway.
Well, that's a good segue.
Yes, it is. So our third story here, and again, we're going to stay out west. This is in Colorado. The owners of a Colorado funeral home were arrested in early November 2023 after nearly 200 decaying corpses were found improperly stored at their facility.
Why do I feel like we hear these stories a couple of times a year?
There are stories like this often. I feel like maybe the problem can get out of hand for some people, but I'm really curious about John and Carrie Halford's intentions when they started the Return to Nature funeral home, which I can only picture as kind of an ironic title now. But they were arrested on 4 felony charges, including abuse of a corpse, theft, money laundering, and forgery, according to a statement from the district attorney for Colorado's 4th Judicial District. And they're being held on bonds set at $2 million. And this is a very disturbing story, too. There are facts that that the investigators didn't really want to talk about with the media or even in court because it's kind of so, I don't know, I guess gruesome and disturbing. But we'll go over a little bit of it. Actually, Carrie Halford was in court on Friday, January 12th, when a judge agreed to unseal an affidavit for one of the funeral home owners where these bodies were found. Although the judge ordered that the affidavit cannot include names, images, and dates of death to protect the victims and their families. But they're basically accused of accepting payment from families of the deceased for cremations and then piling bodies on top of each other in the facility. And they even gave families falsified death certificates and bags of concrete powder in place of their actual loved ones' ashes. And then they forged death certificates. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I was wondering if this was something that they had planned from the start as like a fraud, like a scam, or if it sort of developed into something when they realized, I don't know, maybe they weren't capable of doing certain things, or they realized, hey, we can make a lot of money. We don't actually have to do the things that a normal funeral home would do with the bodies. So I was curious about that. If they entered into this with the intent to fraud and dupe their clientele.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think the funeral home opened in 2019, and in court there were some text exchanges that were between the couple that were introduced in court as evidence, some of them dating all the way back to 2020. And so in one exchange, John Halford messaged his wife that they needed to begin restoring the building in Penrose. And he says, options: A, build a new machine ASAP, which there's no explanation of what machine he's talking about. B, dig a big hole and use lye to, I guess, decompose the bodies. But then he says, where? ? C, dig a small hole and build a large fire. Where? Once again, ask that question. And then he says, D, I go to prison, which is probably going to happen.
Not a very smart move to be sending those as text messages with it on your mind that you could possibly be going to prison.
Yeah, I can only imagine he was somewhat joking about that, but still, it's pretty clear in those early text messages that they knew they were doing something illegal.
Yeah, they knew that they were doing something illegal. At that point, again, I'm still wondering, did it just snowball from an incident that happened one time, and then they realized if we do this numerous times, then it's an easy way to make money? And then all of a sudden they have all of these bodies, like almost 200 bodies.
Well, we haven't heard their defense yet, but
yeah.
I would imagine there's some defense that starts with them wanting, needing money and starting a new business or something like that. But this is really the grossest part here. This is from another text message from John. He says, I want to take a shower as soon as I get back because while I was making the transfer, I got people juice on me.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And then he says, want the double cheeseburger, lettuce wrapped in everything minus tomatoes, please. In the same text.
Well, nothing makes me crave a burger more than people juice.
Yeah, so investigators who entered the funeral home last fall testified that they found stacks of partially covered human remains, bodily fluids several inches deep on the floor, along with flies and maggots.
Nauseating.
It is. Nearly 24 of the bodies had death dates from 2019. 61 were from 2020, 16 from 22, and 40 were from 23. And this includes adults, infants, and fetuses. And the building was apparently 70 degrees at the time investigators went in, when it should have been around 35 to 39 degrees. This is one part that is really upsetting. The remains of a U.S. Army sergeant who was supposed to be buried at Pikes Peak National Cemetery, his remains were actually found inside the building, which led investigators to exhume the casket of whom they said was this Army sergeant. And inside they found a woman inside the military casket.
Right. So it's just something that's out of control. It gets out of control at some point, and they're not even trying to make it function as a functional funeral home.
Yeah, it's bad. That's bad.
Yeah, a lot of people are blaming the state of Colorado for this as well, because they have horrible regulations when it comes to licensing funeral parlors, funeral homes, funeral directors, and some of them don't even have like the same standards or certificates needed that other states have. So I think that's one of the reasons why this keeps happening. Apparently, after looking into this, it keeps happening in Colorado. So it's an easy way to fraud people, because people need a funeral. Everyone dies. People need to have that facility if your loved one has passed. So just like tighten up the regulations.
Yeah, there's probably something they got to do there in Colorado. Yeah, it seems like the Halfords here sort of dove through these loopholes head first and tried to get away with it. But yeah, that is just disturbing, and I feel sorry for the families who enlisted the help of this funeral home.
I know, right? Like, imagine that. You've contracted this funeral home. One of your family members has passed, and now you have no option but to move on, and you're not going to have that moment again where you can have the proper wake or funeral for that person. So what do? All you know now is your loved one is one of the 190 that was stacked and just decomposing.
Unbelievable. And again, the name of the funeral home, Return to Nature Funeral Home. Like, my God.
Yeah.
That's absolutely just absurd to me.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Well, from one ugly story to another, Lance, there's a woman named Kathleen Murray in Tasmania who won the award of World's Ugliest Lawn. And this is according to the town of Gotland, Sweden, who organized this worldwide contest. And apparently the contest started 2 years ago to encourage locals to conserve water amid a near disastrous drought in the town. And this year the contest went global. So lawns in the U.S., Canada, Britain, Germany, France, and Croatia were all competing for these honors. But Kathleen Murray's lawn in Tasmania features sparse patches of yellow grass, shriveled plants, and dry divots caused by the local bandicoots.
You gotta love a local bandicoot. Bandicoot is I believe it's an endangered marsupial, but either way, they leave these divots all over the place, and especially all over Kathleen's lawn. I love this story. It reminds me so much of the time capsule story, the lost time capsule story in Sheldon, Iowa, that we covered last year. Because this notion of taking something that has been, I guess, like a negative thing for people with droughts and everything. But I love it when people have a sense of humor about something, is what I'm trying to say. And this is definitely something that comes with a large amount of humor. They have like an international jury panel from all over the world that judge this, which I think is amazing. And the picture of Kathleen in her lawn is hilarious. She's got her T-shirt on that says "The world's ugliest lawn," and she's so proud.
Yeah, it's definitely an ugly lawn. And Kathleen definitely has a good sense of humor, too. She's got a couple of funny quotes here. She says, "The bandicoots love digging. That's how they find their favorite food. Now my backyard looks like a real-life Hungry Hippo game." Hungry Hippo game. And then she goes on, "I used to think the bandicoots were wildlife of mass destruction invading my lawn. But now I see that they've actually liberated me from ever having to mow it again." And she says, "I'm all for guilt-free weekends, especially since my ex-husband left with the lawnmower back in 2016.
It's hilarious. Good for you, Kathleen. That's so funny. That's so funny. And that T-shirt that I mentioned is apparently a pre-owned T-shirt bearing the phrase "proud owner of the world's ugliest lawn." So
okay.
I think it's fantastic. Did you see anything that shows how these lawns are discovered in the first place?
No.
Like, do people submit their lawns?
I would have to imagine they're submitted, yeah.
Man, I might just go and destroy my lawn to submit it.
So from one kind of animal to a reptile, Lance, there was a venomous snake found in a drawer recently. And according to the New York Post, this is actually the second most deadly venomous snake in the world. And so it's an eastern brown snake. They're fast-moving, aggressive, and known for their bad temper, according to Australian Geographic. And they're native to eastern and central Australia, as well as New Guinea, and they can grow up to 7 feet in length. And so that's what happened recently. There was a venomous snake found in an underwear drawer of a 3-year-old kid.
How? How does this happen?
Good question.
Where does the snake come in from, and why is it now hiding out in a drawer? You know, maybe it's like it's a cool dark space, so I imagine that's part of the allure of being in a drawer. But
I don't know. So
well, this is Australia, right?
Yes. So there's a snake catcher in Australia who is called. His name's Mark Pelly. He's also known as the Snake Hunter.
Famous.
And so he was called to this home where this 5-foot eastern brown snake was in this woman's 3-year-old son's underwear drawer. And apparently what he believes is that she was doing laundry outside on the clothesline and folded the clothes and was unaware of the snake being in those clothes when she brought in the clothes, folded them, and put them away in the drawer. And this guy, Pelly, says, "I've seen people carry brown snakes in their handbag or otherwise shopping bags. One day this could happen to you."
Well, it's definitely not going to happen to me, so I don't know who the you is who he's referring to, but I think, surprisingly, this Mark Pelly guy became a more fascinating part of the story to me because he's a registered nurse. He's a mental health professional. He has a master's degree in mental health, a bachelor of psychology and management, and a bachelor of nursing. And he conducts private mental health assessments for court and workplaces. And he's also a registered immunization nurse who runs his own vaccine clinic called the Vaccine Nation, all while being a famous snake catcher. So as I was looking into this, I was like, who's this guy? He must be like this, hyper fringy, like I was thinking crocodile hunter type guy, but he's not. It's almost like that's his hobby, going to find these, or it's almost like his hobby is rescuing and capturing these snakes.
Right.
How do you get into that? Going from the medical field. How did he learn that he was good at that?
I don't know.
He has to come on Crawlspace.
He's clearly branded himself as the snake hunter, which I have to imagine was directly inspired by the crocodile hunter. But yeah, he's got his own site, snakehunter.com.au. He's got a little bit of a TikTok following. So yeah, he's kind of out there as a snake hunter type guy. Apparently, these eastern brown snakes are kind of lightweight as well. So that's how it could happen without people noticing. Interesting.
Oh, look, folding it up in clothing.
Yeah, I guess so. They weigh next to nothing, he says.
One minute you're just slithering along, and the next you're in a drawer.
I mean, check out the video, too. It is kind of creepy.
Oh, yeah. I almost wanted to give like a trigger warning at the top of this.
Yeah.
Because people who have fear of snakes, like that's kind of debilitating. But do you have a fear of snakes?
Why'd it have to be snakes?
Okay, Indy.
No, I don't. I don't think I personally really have a fear of snakes, but I haven't really been dropped into a pit of them or anything like that.
Yeah. I really haven't had enough contact with them to have a fear. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. See them. I think they're cool. Like, how does that work? You know, how does all that mechanisms? How do all the mechanisms work to have it slither the way it does? Like all of those muscle contractions. I think that's a fascinating concept, a fascinating development of just a living thing.
Yeah, I agree. And then they shed their skin. That's always kind of cool.
It's a badass.
Yeah.
But right now, like I'm looking over, like in the corner over there. Like if I saw a snake over there, I'd probably get on the horn to Mark.
I'll say, "Crikey, bloke, what you want me to do about it? I'm over here in Australia.
I'm in the land down under, and I sound like I'm Cockney."
Apologies.
Yeah, apologies to
Apologies
everyone.
there.
But you can follow him right on TikTok. He's got a bunch of like ice bath stuff too. Sorry, I'm just kind of obsessed with this guy now that he's got so many things going on.
He does seem to have a lot of careers. And Lance, that brings us to our next story about an escaping emu named Esmerelda, who escaped from her Alabama home for the third time and was spotted running loose around town before returning to her home. And this is from January of 2023 in the town of Pilleri.
You say emu, and I'm on board because they're amazing animals. You say escaped emu, and I'm even further interested. Esmeralda is a great name for an emu, but escaped for the third time, and I'm hooked. I'm in. After the first time your emu escapes, don't you have a complete reassessment of their area and ensure that this isn't going to happen again? And then after the second time.
Yeah, I would think that's something you got to sort of lock up a little bit more or fence up or whatever. But the owner of Esmerelda and her sister, Ursula.
Love it.
This owner's name is Sue Sanford. And Sue says that Esmerelda is the friendlier bird of the pair, but also the more adventurous one. And apparently the two sisters reportedly had a domestic dispute.
Aww.
And that resulted in Esmerelda making a swift exit from her home.
So I think Esmeralda is, like you said, Esmeralda is the more friendly one, but I feel like she's the more empathetic one, and things really affect her more because this is the third time and she just wants to leave these situations that upset her, which is kind of sad. So I feel like her sister should, maybe reflect on this and think to herself, hey, what if something bad happens to my sister because I'm provoking her to leave? I'm starting this domestic situation, and after all, come on, this is blood relations here.
Yeah. And Esmerelda had previously escaped a few years ago and became a local celebrity when she escaped for a second time this past December. And then she just did it again. And Sue says, I get a lot of comments because now she's very well known from December. So, of course, right away, people say, not again. And Esmeralda's latest escape proved short-lived as she did return home on her own, which is kind of funny to me.
Yeah, it feels like Esmeralda wanted to reconcile with her sister and wanted to sort of join the flock again. Probably cooled down a little bit. Like, my personal opinion, like I said, is that she's the more empathetic or emotional one, so she just needed to like blow off some steam.
Yeah, I think so. That's what the city said in its update to its Facebook post. They said, after reflecting on her actions while she was on the run, she decided that she should remain with her sister in the flock together. And so hopefully they reconciled their differences, Esmeralda and Ursula.
I hope so. I was curious about whether having an emu as a pet was even a good thing in the first place, and apparently it's a really good thing, and it's recommended that you have more than one. So you need 2 or 3. You need to make sure that there's a flock.
So they're social and happy?
Yeah, so I think so they're social, so they have a good disposition. They're able to interact with each other. I guess just the way it would be with any other pet. Like the more they interact with other animals, the better that they'll be, the calmer they'll be, the healthier they'll be. I think it's time we introduce an emu here to the household and see if Eric will take to the emu.
Yeah, you need at least 2. I mean, that's pretty much the same reasons why we had a second kid over here, Lance.
Similar to an emu. And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. And so if you weren't too grossed out about the funeral home story earlier, you will be with our final story here about an exploding toilet at a Florida Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah. I was thinking about how to intro this story. Like, hey, yeah. Tim, you love your Dunkin'. You love your Dunkin' coffee. You love your...
Yeah, not really.
I don't either. Yeah, so that wasn't a proper intro to the story. They're also doing this weird ad campaign that is taking the guilt out of drinking iced coffee in the winter in New England. Have you heard this ad campaign?
It's not going to land with me because I have no guilt about it. I'll drink an iced coffee. If I go to Dunkin' Donuts, I'm probably going to get an iced coffee in the winter, summer, spring, or fall. Don't matter.
Nor should you have guilt about it. Yeah. I think that's you nailed it. That's my problem with this ad campaign. We'll get back to the exploding toilet in a second, but that's my problem with this ad campaign is that they're introducing guilt that was never there in the first place. So now people who didn't have guilt, there's probably a percentage of them who will say, "Oh, was I even supposed to feel guilty about this? I didn't think that this was even a thing." But apparently someone in their marketing department thought that this was a good ad campaign.
I don't know. To me, even a Dunkin's in Florida seems a little out of place. And I know that they took forever to move west, and they eventually moved all the way to California, some of them, but or a few anyway. But I don't know. It does still feel a little bit out of place to me. So this fella, Paul Kerouac, is seeking more than $100,000 in a lawsuit that he filed recently in state court in Orlando. And he claims he suffered, quote, severe and long-term injuries, end quote, following the explosion of a toilet in the men's room of a Dunkin' in Winter Park, Florida, a little over a year ago.
I mean, it goes without saying that this exploding toilet did cover him with parts of the toilet, also feces, urine.
Yeah, so what I'm wondering is how it exploded. Like maybe, a sewage backup or something like that, but it sounds like part of the toilet flew off too. Like did someone put like a bomb in there? Like firecrackers? Or was this just like a sewage backup that was going to happen at some point no matter what?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. It's interesting, right? Like there's probably a ton of gas that's being generated in the sewage system. And if there's a backup, then this pressure is building and building. And I imagined this moment where he flushed, and for whatever reason, that was what triggered it. But maybe it opened up a gas pocket or something. But that's like porcelain. That has to be like a powerful explosion that's just naturally generated. You know what I mean? Like if it wasn't some sort of like cherry bomb or something or some introduced explosive device, this is a naturally generated gas explosion.
So the toilet farted is what you're saying.
I wasn't thinking about it in those terms, but I think that's a really good way to put it. And you don't want to be around a toilet when it farts.
So, sorry, good listeners.
Yeah.
What's weird about this story is an employee told Mr. Kerouac that they were aware of the quote, problem with the toilet since there had been previous incidents, the lawsuit says. There's no further explanation on what previous incidents there were, but the fact that there was a problem with the toilet and that there were previous incidents has me believing that Mr. Kerouac is going to win his court case.
Absolutely, and he should. Physical damage to his person is one thing, but is he ever walking in a public bathroom again and not thinking about this? Is he ever walking in a public bathroom again, period?
It does sound like it actually messed with him mentally. Oh, at least that's what his lawsuit's claiming. So it claims that he did suffer bodily injury, but he has required mental health care and counseling since the incident in January 2022, 2 years ago.
Wow. I'm sure his lawyer was like, go seek counseling ASAP. You need this counseling. We need to get that on the record and stay away from public toilets. Dunkin' Donuts, which rebranded as Dunkin', is a huge company. And they mentioned that they are from Canton, Massachusetts, which I thought was like a dig at Massachusetts for some reason. I don't know why they had to put that in there. Like all crappy things happen and they come from Massachusetts.
I think it's just where the company started, right?
Yeah, but I felt like, I know I'm being irrational about it, but I just felt like it was a dig at Massachusetts because this is a Florida thing. And I feel like Florida's like, come on, enough. Like, you're always making fun of Florida. So here. Oh, just by the way, this it's not just us. You know, this company was from Massachusetts. It's a huge company. I don't know the numbers here, but I'm going to say a multi-billion-dollar company. And I'm sure that this franchise owner in this particular store had a opportunity to bring in a plumber and fix the problem with the toilet. Now, how much would that have possibly cost in comparison to what is being asked for in this lawsuit? It couldn't have cost more than a couple $1,000s. Typically, these Dunkins have 2 bathrooms, so you could shut one down and only operate with one restroom while this one's being fixed. So it really wouldn't have been like a big deal. Where did the drop in priorities, where did that happen here?
Well, that's a great question. Now, I do know from having worked at a Dunkin' Donuts when I was 16 that some of them are corporate owned and some of them are franchises. So this one maybe was a franchise sort of owned by a person independent really of the company. They kind of just like rent the name Dunkin' Donuts. So maybe that's what was going on at this one and it wasn't a corporate one. I don't know. But being such a big company, as you mentioned, Lance, a multi-billion-dollar company that Dunkin' Donuts is, you'd think they'd have better coffee.
I mean, the coffee's not good. Sorry, Dunkin' fans out there.
I'm not sorry.
Coffee's not good. I'm not saying like I'm a coffee snob, but it's a tough drink. and stop it with the dark coffee. Just because your coffee is super dark doesn't mean it's good. Like at some point, it's just going to be tar. It's hot tar.
Or iced tar.
And that's why your toilets blow up.